Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, it's Jory Rose, and welcome back to this week's podcast episode. I am really pleased to be connecting with Shari Alyse this morning. Shari, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself and share with our listeners where you're from, what you do, and what's the magic and how you show up in the world.
Small question there.
I just like to jump right in.
Right. Thank you so much, Dory, for having me on. I'm excited to be here and grateful to be able to share today with you and just have this conversation. As you said, my name is Shari Alyse, and I live in Los Angeles. And I am a motivational speaker. I'm also a best-selling author and known to be the joy coach, also known as the joy magnet. And my passion...
No small title there. I can't wait to dive in to see how you got to be known as the joy magnet, but we'll get there. So I sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's true. Like no pressure there, which is actually funny because it was part of my journey, but we can get into that later and being able to accept those parts of myself. But yeah, my passion really is helping people to reconnect back to themselves so they can see themselves the way who they truly are, rebuild their self-worth. I help people do that through the practices of self-love. So ultimately, you and I, all of us can live a joy-filled life.
Oh my gosh, don't we all just need more of that right now? I mean, I think now more than ever. But first of all, congratulations on being a best-selling author. And I'm really curious, how did this become your journey?
Well, I experienced childhood trauma as when I was 7 years old. I was sexually abused by a stranger.
Oh,
and I know
goodness.
That's a heavy thing just to dive right into. But it's, it's the journey. It's mine. And it's interesting without jumping. Well, I'm jumping really far ahead. But last year, I remember, during lockdown, for whatever saving grace, Starbucks was like the one thing that was considered essential. And I was like, yes, it is. And I would go, there was one near me that would open at 4:30 in the morning. And I would go at 5 o'clock in the morning when nobody else was out. And I was like fully geared up, all my stuff and gloves on and napkin. And anyway, I was coming back from Starbucks and it was a red light. And I was just sitting there. And all of a sudden the words just came out of my mouth. Thank God for my trauma.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've already known the lessons along the way and how I've grown and all that, but this deep, I don't know another way to say it, this deep gratitude for it, like for the first time, because I was able to really navigate and handle a pandemic that I don't think that I would have ever been able to if I hadn't already done the 46-year journey up to this point. And so just fast forwarding to that. So it really started at 7 years old, but probably even before then, my parents were divorced and there was a really bitter divorce from when I was 2 years old. And my mom was really unhappy. And we lived in that and I felt that. And the one thing that I noticed, though, is anytime that I would walk in the room and I would do something silly or I would just notice a smile on her face and it changed the energy in the room.
Yeah.
And I realized from a young age that I had the power to shift people, to change what they were feeling. And between that and after the abuse, not having anybody to talk to about it, knowing that what I had gone through had affected other people, made them uncomfortable. I became very aware and very in touch with how everybody else was feeling.
Yeah.
And I learned to walk in the world that way, being mindful although that's a nice way of saying it, really just trying to please everybody and do what everybody else needed to do to try to keep the calm and keep the peace and not make people upset, you know?
So there's really two sides of that coin, right? And I imagine that, well, I guess I'm curious, not I imagine, that there's quite a bit of power in that, to realize I have the power to shift the energy for somebody else. And that's a beautiful feeling. And I can bring this light and this, smile to someone's face. And yet, is there some pressure there that comes with that awareness of that power that you hold?
Absolutely. But here's the thing, when I was that age, I didn't get the good side of that, the light and the power of it. I mean, I got parts of that, but what that turned into for me was I started pursuing acting, because there was that, here I can do this and I can shift and I can change. But what was underlying that was this need for validation, was this need for, you're okay, I love you, you're so wonderful, you're so great.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that for years. It was like, no, I love acting, which I do. And I did, but the driving force underneath that. So I didn't really get to the light part of it, to the power and how I can shift people, until years later, when I realized that I actually enjoyed being me more than I did playing a character. And so I started bringing my healing journey out to the world, but I integrated my love for entertainment. So with stages, but then with my inspiring message to become a motivational speaker.
Wow. So that's quite the jump. And I think this is a question that I'm as a therapist, I work with, a lot of people over the course of my career in various forms of how I've shown up in service and working with others. This is one of the big questions we all struggle with. How do I find comfort, safety, security, confidence in just being me? Because that's really hard, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, we're facing a lot of old narratives, other people's narratives, traumas, wounds, pains, healings. So yeah, that's, gosh, the words that you said, that is, I enjoy being myself more than I enjoyed being a character. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And it took decades to get there, Jory. And but here's the thing. I think most of us spend so much time disconnected from ourselves.
Yes.
That if we just sat more with ourselves, it would actually be a lot easier to begin to accept and love, because there's no way that you can't see your power and you can't see your beauty and you can't see your magic and your light and all of that. But of course you gotta swim through and dive through and excavate all of that. But we're so busy with the social media and the eating and the food and so there's no time for that.
Yeah, I completely relate to that on so many levels. This is really how I always say mindfulness found me. I didn't seek it out, but it was a series of serendipitous events that led me to get to where I am. But when I first took my very first mindfulness class, and I was guided in meditation, and I was in my early 30s after having just lived my life for what was next, wanting to seek safety and security when I otherwise was anxious and fearing the unknown and was unsettled in who I was. And I thought, well, if I cultivate this perfect life, then I'll be happy, right? Mm-hmm. And then it was like, I got to all of the destinations of what was next. And I'm like, shit, now what?
I'm still not happy.
Right. And I was happy, but not fulfilled. And it was this much deeper existential lack of fulfillment. And I realized that I had been living kind of up in my head. And so to your very point, I had to learn how to just drop in and get still and learn about myself from within, not from these external, what it looks like on the outside. And that's really scary for a lot of people, to have the courage to slow down and to sit with what is, because it brings up a lot of fear, anxiety. It can bring up those old traumas. But we also, it takes time to learn how to love ourselves and accept, which is why some people just stay really busy, which I have a lot of compassion for. I understand it.
Absolutely. I mean, you just said it all. That's why I ran for so long, because it was too painful to sit still for a minute, for fear of what would come up. And of course, in the beginning, in my 20s, I didn't know that's what I was doing. In my 20s, it was like, oh, I'm having just so much fun. This is what you do in your 20s. You go out drinking and partying, and you hang out with men, and you do all these things, and just keeping myself busy and really just pushing down the pain and pushing down anything that wanted to come up. But I rationalized it as, this is what you're supposed to do.
Look how much fun I'm having, right?
Right. Until, the next morning, like, this isn't very fun. Okay, Shari, like, let's not do this again. It doesn't feel good. And then later that night, it was like, let's do this all over again.
Yeah.
And so I have complete compassion too, because even now to this day, no matter how much I know, there are still, like, we still have our coping mechanisms. There are times that I don't want to sit in that pain. And so maybe I'll go get something to eat, but I recognize it and I go, okay, Shari, what aren't you want to deal with? Like, I think it's so important for people that are listening, and I think for the world to know, really, is that no matter how much we know and how much we learn and how much people, awaken, enlighten, the challenges never stop coming. They still keep showing up. It's just having tools to be able to navigate that. And I think that's so important for people to know, because people compare so often, or they think, once I get to this place, everything's going to be great. I still face challenges internal every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's just part of being human.
Right.
And, kind of bringing it back to one of the first things you said of beginning of COVID, thank God for my trauma, because I have the skills and the tools to know how to manage this adversity. I remember having a client right in the beginning of COVID who said something very similar, like, I'm so grateful for having been going through my divorce for the past year and a half, because I know how to deal with the unexpected.
Yes.
And it's an interesting thing. Just last night, so by the time this airs, it's going to be a couple of weeks after, but as I'm talking to you on this Monday morning, just last night was the first time I sat with my family for a holiday meal. It was Passover, and we have been very conservative with COVID, and we were outside, and most all the adults are vaccinated. The kids still are not, but we came together for the first time for a holiday meal. And my mom was, in quite tears over the fact that we've overcome this year. And my family has collectively made the choices to stay really safe, not just for ourselves, but for the higher good of the family. And she just, as the mom, of course, was very proud and very happy that we were all here healthy and having gotten through this year of big adversity. And with such strength and resilience without complaining. And of course, it was hard, don't get me wrong, right? But, 4 teenagers in the family, and everyone was very strong and resilient. And when she was done crying and talking, I kind of spoke for my siblings and said, well, you're our role model. And of course, this is how we would face this challenge, because she had a lot of trauma in her life, and her role modeling trauma was through great strength and resilience, but not without feeling it, right? And this is one of those challenges of emotions and spiritual bypassing. You can't just get to the end goal to say, oh, but look, we got through it. You got to feel your way through it. And, this is something maybe is role modeled, but maybe just has to be learned on our own. And I'm really grateful for my mom as a role model to our collective family, that in, her traumas, that of course has been passed on, of how you build strength and resilience and you keep living. And I don't take it lightly. And, so we have so much to be informed from our pain about what to do to create joy. To kind of come back to that being the joy magnet and that motivational speaker that you're doing. How did you make that connection as an adult from getting through, why am I doing what I'm doing? Let me be intentional, feel what I'm feeling, and not just go get the food or go do whatever to, deny or dismiss or ignore what I'm feeling. So what did you do? So, our listeners can, maybe gain some tools or inspiration to make that jump, because it's way easier said than done.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Well, first, your story with your family, I just got goosebumps listening I because of thinking about what everybody has gone through, and to be able to have that reunion again and to be around,
Yeah.
I just think that's amazing. And I can't
Thank
wait to see
you.
my family too.
Yes. It
Hopefully
definitely makes the
here.
reunions much sweeter.
Yeah, for sure. So, as I said, the journey wasn't easy to just like show up. One day I wasn't just like, oh, look at all this joy. Although the majority of my life, it's interesting. You said several things. So you talked about spiritual bypassing and,
Mm-hmm.
our parent and your mom and what she set the example for you from a young age, from when the abuse happened. I actually testified against my abuser. So I
Oh,
was on the
wow.
witness stand at 7 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That's double traumas right there, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
layered upon layers.
And especially the way they treated me in there, and then the way that I was treated afterwards. So there's so many layers in there. But what I had been told is that he had done this to other girls, and so that I saved other girls, which of
Wow.
course is nothing easy to carry, because what my mom kept saying and people kept saying is, you're a hero, you're so courageous, you're so brave. And I didn't feel any of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel any of that. I was just scared. But I kept hearing it. And so those are the words that I carried with me. And so in every situation in my life, the way that I coped with things was like this, you're brave, you're courageous, you're strong. And so I just kept pushing through, and I will not be a victim, and I will not this. And, with all of these thoughts in my head, but what ended up happening, as you mentioned, is that I never connected to my emotions. So I would just power through things. And of course, those emotions just kept stacking and stacking, and I just kept pushing them down.
They don't go anywhere. I often say, that we'll sweep it under the rug, and eventually we're just going to trip over the pile under the rug.
Yeah. And that's what happened. It got to a point where it was like my physical body actually was like, we're done, and when you have physical pain that can't be explained, at some point you got to start paying attention.
Sure.
Yeah. And it was, there was several moments in my life, all the whispers, then, the 2x4. I mean, I had many of those until I finally stopped and paid attention. And I just remember this one particular night. I was, one of my partying nights back in my 20s. Actually, it was my late 20s, early 30s. And I remember I was hanging out with my best friend, and I said to him, I'm such a good person. I don't understand why this keeps happening, and why is he treating me like this and this and that. And he said to me, well, Shari, what kind of woman do you see yourself as? And I started rattling off, well, she's confident and she respects herself and she's this and all of these things that just like, pour forth. And he said, so then be her. And, it was that particular moment on that particular day at that time that I heard that.
You were ready to hear it, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah. And for the first time I had a vision, because up until that point, as you mentioned, living unconsciously and just go autopilot, right? And just going and doing, this is what a brave woman is, blah, 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 but not embodying it. And so in that moment, I had a vision for myself, something to look at, to look ahead to. So when you say, what can people do? The first thing I always say is have a vision for yourself. Who do you see yourself as? Because up until that point, I knew I had that thing inside that's like, there's more for you, Shari, that voice that was like, that knew I wasn't given this life sentence to suffering and struggling. I just didn't know the map to get there. I'm just running around aimlessly, like feeling like my eyes are closed. And I knew I had this feeling that I could get to, but I just didn't know what that looked like. Yeah. And so for the first time I had direction. And so I started, and it may sound silly, but the first thing was when I was in unhealthy relationships with men. And so when this particular guy texted me, I remember thinking, well, what would that woman that you see yourself as, what would she do right now? And the first thing was, she would not text him back. And so I didn't. And then that turned into another choice, that turned into not returning a phone call. And then that turned into us not speaking for weeks. And then before I knew it, I started making better choices, small little ones.
But those are huge. Those might look small, but those are
Yeah.
huge because you broke a pattern.
Right.
And you were conscious and intentional in that response. And oh gosh, this lights me up to hear, because this is speaking my language around, is what I'm doing in alignment with either my values or who I want to be? And if it's not, then I got to change what I'm doing.
That's right. And until you have that awareness of who it is that you want to be, because up until that point, I had the victim consciousness in the sense that it was always everybody else's fault and the world was against me. It's funny, I used to call myself the dark cloud. So to go from dark cloud to joy magnet is quite the transformation.
I think, that is a beautiful transformation. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, I didn't, again, see a way out. And so it was always everybody else's fault and the world was against me and God didn't love me. And these are just the kind of people that were out there. And then when I was able to realize that that I could take responsibility for my life and I could make the choices, and maybe like this, what if, Shari, the world wasn't against you, right? I began to imagine the possibilities of what my life could look like if I made different choices.
Hold on, I want to pause there for a second, because that is such a powerful question. What if the world isn't against me? And there's so much alignment in the language you and I use. And this is something that I will talk with my clients about, because there's a lot of people based on narratives, traumas, whatever it is, believe that the world is out against them. Mm-hmm. And I will often very lovingly and compassionately and jokingly say, you're not that special. You are unique. And the universe does not have that much time to, handpick which ones the universe is going to be for or against. Like, don't think of the universe as sitting back saying, you know what, I'm going to choose this one over here to just not support. That's not the way the universe works. And, to bring some lightheartedness to it, I think is a helpful way to sit with, but that's been my mentality, because it feels like I just can't get ahead. It feels like every turn is another roadblock or resistance. Or, I often will say, well, what if the roadblock is really just a speed bump? Mm-hmm. We perceive it as a roadblock, but maybe it's actually just meant for you to slow down. And what would happen if you just slowed down and perhaps shifted or reframed your interpretation of what's arising, versus automatically make the assumption the universe doesn't have my back?
Yes. It's so funny that you say that, first of all, because I said that to my sister. I remember telling her that years ago, going like, when I started having these what if the world isn't against you? I'm like, for the first time I thought, like, do you really think, Shari, do you really think that you are the one person chosen in this world that's just chosen to suffer, that everything's just going to go bad for you? And you're just like, is that really a possibility? Like, what did you actually do to deserve that? And when I began thinking that way, imagining the difference, imagining the possibilities, imagining a different life for myself, I mean, that just like blew me open. It was as if all the
the angels arose and
it was like taking my mind out from this really dark, stuck place that was so buried to like just shifting my gaze the other direction. And it was like this whole new world was available to me.
Yeah.
And once that became available to me, then I was able to start taking action. Like I said, like with the texting of the guys and this and and do you need to have that? Are you hungry right now, Shari? Like, do you need to have that? Or, whatever, again, those choices were. And what would happen is that when toxic things would come into my hemisphere, all of a sudden it would feel bad in my body, where I didn't have that awareness before. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel good, because I was so used to starting to feel good, like making these good choices.
Yes. Yeah. And so it becomes easier to stick with that alignment, because you recognize, oh, wait, this actually feels good in my body versus just thinking it's going to be good.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me, I love that embodiment of what you were saying of, having that vision of that self that you wanted to really be, and how would she respond? It kind of reminds me of with Beyonce's, alter ego, Sasha Fierce, and how to step into this archetype that you really want to embody, but aren't quite sure yet. So I see that's where your acting skills came in too, because it's a powerful thing. And it's a fine line, because I've actually had this conversation with clients, and it's a fine line from truly believing this is your possibility and potential and embodying that energy, that thought process, those actions, those words, versus feeling like you're being inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's a very fine line of authenticity versus believe in, because I'm not a big believer in fake it till you make it. That feels really, really inauthentic to me. And I don't want people to fake anything, but I do want people to believe in the possibility, even if they're not there yet.
Okay, so we so speak the same language,
yes.
Like we're the same person, because that was my journey, because that was the layer I was at then. That was the first part of it, to imagine the possibilities, right? And to be able to start taking that action, because that opened me up to other things. But of course, I didn't, in that moment, like my self-worth was still like, wah, wah. I mean, it was, so I didn't believe all of that. I just believed that something else was possible for me. And now I had to begin the journey there.
Yep.
And so, and I always say the same thing about fake it till you make it, because I always tell this story, and I was like, that actor in me knew how to show up in a certain way, but I didn't fully embody it yet. That again took time. And, another whole different part of my journey where compassion began.
Yeah.
And that for me is the game changer for everybody.
Speak more to that, because you're still speaking my language, girlfriend.
When one day, it was probably about maybe 12 years ago or something. 15 years ago was when I was still pursuing acting, and I was waiting tables, because that's what you do when you're an actor. And I was taking a shower and getting ready for work. And I had this breakdown in my shower. And it was the first time that I had actually relived what happened to me at 7, meaning felt it in my body.
Yeah.
And it was, and I remember I had to get ready and get to work. And as I'm driving to work, I was just crying, and I called my manager, and we were friends. And I was like, listen, I can't come into work today. I'm having all of these flashbacks. And she was like, Shari, take whatever time you need. And long story short, because I wrote a lot about it in my book about what happened, because all these divine, oh my goodness, experiences happened over the years. But what came to me one day shortly afterwards was me crying in the shower. This is a different time, by the way, and saying, all I needed was a hug. And so I heard a voice that said, so give her a hug. And I literally wrapped my arms around my body and I hugged myself. And by the way, it's become a practice for me every single day. There's not a day that goes by. I probably do it 2 to 3 times a day, where I just hold myself. And the reason why I mention that is because up until that point, I hadn't sat with my 7-year-old self long enough to actually feel what she went through, and to extend understanding and kindness and love, to understand her journey and why she's made all the choices, why I've made all the choices that I did up until that point. And once I started giving myself that space and cultivating, that space within, I feel like it's fertile ground for then yourself to start healing, because nobody wants to, your true feelings, your emotions, all the stuff you're going through doesn't want to show up in a place where it feels unsafe.
Absolutely not.
Right. So sitting with her and giving her that time to share, to open up, to be there, like that is what has transformed my journey in this later part of my life.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful expression of self-compassion. And, when you said, sorry for the chuckle, because it's one of my favorite words. Whenever I hear someone saying I'm having a breakdown, I think of that line from Jerry Maguire, breakdown or breakthrough. Because usually we need that breakdown to get to that breakthrough, right? Yeah. And it's so powerful. And again, you and I are still aligned. And this is one of the things that I've taught for years around self-compassion, is that the brain doesn't know the difference from someone hugging you versus you hugging yourself. The brain doesn't know. All it knows is soothing touch. And when we receive soothing touch, we get that oxytocin, we get that, chemical release of feeling safe, secure, loved. Mm-hmm. And, it's mind opening. At the same time, it's confusing for people to realize and honor and acknowledge, wait, I can do that for myself. It doesn't have to be an external expression. And I'm willing to even take it the step further to say, if you can't offer that to yourself, you're not going to be able to receive it from anyone else because you're not going to believe it.
Goosebumps, because it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so powerful giving that to yourself, giving yourself what you needed, what you need. Even just from every day, one of my practices every day is just checking in with myself. I actually have reminders on my phone that says connection time. And
I love that.
Yeah. And it's like literally just stopping whatever I'm doing and going, how are you feeling, Shari? And in that moment, do you need a hug? Do you need to just sit with yourself? Do you need to keep going? Like whatever that is. So these gifts that we give ourselves, the hugs, the checking in, whatever that is, until we do that for ourselves, you're right, we can't receive that from other people because more often than not, I think we feel like we're not worthy of that.
Yeah. And the other challenge there is when I do that check-in is to say, I feel really shitty right now, or this is real, I'm in pain, or I'm lonely, or I'm hurting, to be able to sit with that without pushing it away, denying, dismissing, ignoring, resisting. Mm-hmm. Because at the root of, for me on the mindfulness practice is acceptance. And people will always say to me, but Joy, how do I accept what I don't like? So people, want to be able to get to that next level of offering self-compassion, but you've got to overcome the mindset to say, I've got to be willing to be okay with not being okay. Mm-hmm. And, not accepting what's arising, the pain, discomfort, insecurity, fears, anxieties, whatever it may be, not accepting it doesn't make it go away. And the paradox is accepting it makes it go away quicker.
Right. That's where we create the struggle, is in the non-acceptance.
Yes.
And people don't realize it. Like, I don't want to feel that, because I used to do it too. I don't want to feel this way. I should be happy all the time. I should, I'm positive. I'm a positive person. I'm a motivational person. And that was where I said before, people expected something from me because I was always the positive one. And so I was bypassing the way that I was feeling to show up a certain way. There's actually even a chapter in my book that says, well, there's two of them. Stop trying to look on the bright side. And then the other one is sometimes shit just sucks. And
shit does just suck.
Yes. And not trying to have to change everything, because it's in that acceptance, it's in that sitting with and being okay, that's where I think that's where the peace lies. And to be totally honest, that's where I believe our joy is ignited.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I love that idea of, stop looking at the bright side, because there's, I think a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, this toxic positivity comes out. And we want to be able to look for the silver linings. And believe me, I'm an optimistic person by nature. I do believe there's a lesson and a lining in everything. But we can't be looking for it so quickly to avoid what we're feeling now. Unless we're, giving space for both, then that silver lining or the bright side is just going to be an illusion.
Yes. And that's where I spent half of my life, was in that illusion. Was just, this is the bright side. And not dealing with and facing what it was that I was really feeling, because I was just, again, trying to be brave and strong and courageous and push through.
Yeah. One of the things that you said a few moments ago, I want to loop back around to, with this idea of you being this motivational speaker and a joy magnet, with the expectation, perhaps from yourself or you, especially I'm guessing from others, that you have to be happy all the time. And that's such a misguided perception on our human emotional experience. And so I'm wondering, just to speak to that a few more moments around what I'm going to say again is the paradox of I can be a cultivator and harbinger of joy, but that doesn't mean I'm always happy.
Yes, joy and happiness are two completely different things. Happiness is dependent on our circumstances, our external things, all the things that are going on, and it's transitory. I mean, joy to me, and what I've learned, not only in my own journey, but talking about people and all the digging I've done around it, is that joy is a state of being. It's who we are. You can't change it. For me, the definition for me of joy is being fully in alignment with my truth and being expressed in all moments.
Yes. Love that.
I mean, I feel that, and this is going to get a little woo-woo. So
please,
I don't know.
Go woo-woo. I love it. Please.
Okay. So I feel that joy is like my soul celebrating being and having the human experience.
Yes.
Because we came into our bodies and now I get to feel and I get to touch and I get to sense and I get to feel it all, the whole range of human emotions. Yes. And that's why, like, when we're born, you know, they always talk about children having so much joy, and it's only over time that we begin to dim that from our wounds and our, you know, traumas and whatever else that is, and everything that we've learned about how we're supposed to show up. But when we connect back to ourselves and our truths and we allow ourselves to express, and sometimes that expression is sadness, and sometimes that's frustration and it's anger and it's jealousy and it's all of that. My joy lies in being able to sit in that and being okay with it all.
Yes. Yes. It's again, it's a paradox to see that you need one for the other. And it's a cliche to say, you know, we need the sadness to find the joy, and all of the cliches about it. And yet it is its deepest truth. That is our deepest wisdom. And, you know, I don't know if you've seen the movie Inside Out, but this is a reference point that I will talk a lot about with my clients. And I've actually, my fiance, who is an expert in emotions and actually consulted on the movie Inside Out on the character Anger, which was a big attraction point to me on his Tinder profile when we met. I thought that's really hot.
I love that.
But he and I got to do a little bit of work with Paul Ekman a couple years ago. And Paul Ekman is the world's leading researcher on emotions. And he, back in the 60s, traveled to over 60 countries around the world, even countries that had, you know, kind of no spoken language, to really see what the universal emotions are. And it wouldn't be, the movie Inside Out wouldn't have been possible without the work of Paul Ekman, because those are the 5 universal emotions of joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And, you know, when I work with my clients around, well, I just want to get happy. I just want to be happy. I just want to feel joyful. It's like, wait a second, let's take a look at just the numbers of it, like the statistics. Like, joy is only 1/5 of those 5 universal emotions. And yet we expect it to be almost 90% of our existence. Mm-hmm. So statistically, math doesn't work that way. You know? Exactly. And to your point of what you said, it is when we allow ourselves the full spectrum of being alive. Yeah. To allow the space for the other emotions to be present is what gives us the possibility for the joy. Because in the movie Inside Out, sadness is the heroine, not joy. You know, sadness kind of saves the day around how we get back to the joy, is when we give sadness that space. And that's why it's just such a beautiful and yet simple and yet incredibly complex thing to wrap our head around.
Well, first, I haven't seen that movie, so I do want to see it.
Oh my gosh, you need to. Okay, that's your homework.
Okay.
I'm assigning you homework. Go watch Pixar's Inside Out. It's one of Pixar's most beautiful movies and is fairly accurate in its description from a scientific level of emotions. And basically, we've got these 5 emotions that are at the control panel of our brain, and different emotions take different turns at the control panel of our brain. And the assumption is that joy should always be at the control panel.
Mm-hmm.
And as the main character, she's 11 years old and goes through changes and hormonal changes. All these other emotions start taking over. And she's like, what the hell is happening? And her aspects of herself are dying off because she doesn't know what to do when joy is not always present.
Mm. Wow.
It's beautiful. And it's scientifically pretty spot on. Pixar did their homework very, very well for it.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it. I think you'll really appreciate it.
Okay, I got homework. I see.
Yes.
No, but I think we do. And I think society does that to us, like this is, you got to be happy. Everybody, don't worry, be happy. Even that song, which I remember like being in my head all the time. It was like, yes, of course, we shouldn't, worry about things that we have no control over, but everything was about like, get happy in 3 days or and no wonder why we feel so much pressure, or that's at the forefront of everything.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I feel for, especially the teenagers these days, because it's so in our face of that comparison mind.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to when you and I were kids, right? You didn't know necessarily what was happening on the weekend when you weren't a part of it. And so that perception of what people post on social media, of everyone always being happy and having a great time and, representing a portion of their life that is clearly just the tip of the iceberg, because no one's really posting what's happening underneath.
Right.
It's, I think it's going to be even more of an uphill battle for the next generation to not be in comparison or the perception of, oh, but look how happy they are.
Absolutely. It's so funny because you asked me before about, having to feel that I had to show up or people had these expectations of me. And it was interesting because I've been posting videos for well over a decade, even like before they were called vlogs. They were just videos on MySpace. And, I when I was it's been for every part of my journey. So in the beginning, it was like that, just the happy Shari, and that's that illusion. And over time, because I'm always sharing my truth, like my journey and what I understand at that time. And so it's progressed over time where it began, I started sharing my tough days and what I was going through, and people didn't know how to handle that. They were like, whoa, your videos are getting heavy. And I'm like, no, it's real life.
Yep.
None of us are always in this high spot. This is what I'm actually going through. And these are the tools that I use to help me, but they weren't ready for that. And so there's all these expectations. While people had helped them feel less alone, there were others that were like, oh, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah. Good way to shock them into some awareness. Damn it, you're human. My fiance, John, and he's got a PhD in psych, and he works mostly with men, and but he and I do couples work together. And we, as partners, professionally and personally, we show up as our full selves with our clients. And we will, we're not therapists who are gratuitously, talking about ourselves and sharing what's coming up for us, but we do share that very real piece in an effort to say, number one, I'm human too, damn it, at times, I don't want to feel this is painful, but just because we teach this and are trained, this doesn't prevent us from feeling all these human things. And it creates a deeper connection, because then our clients are like, oh, wait, you get what I'm feeling. You understand this. And we're not only doing it to get that vulnerability to breed deeper connection, but we're sharing, here's where we get stuck. And here's what these tools look like in practice that we still practice all the time, whether individually or as a couple. And, it makes for such a deeper human connection to say, oh, wait, this is, you understand me, you get me. Because I really believe at the end of the day, all of us just want to feel seen, heard, and validated.
Without a doubt. And that's part of what compassion is too.
Yes.
It's about seeing somebody else. It's about someone realizing that they're not alone in this.
Yes.
they're not the only, it's the shared humanity. It's the shared feeling. And that's how I think we're all going to heal. And when we're all able to take our masks down and show up in our truths, that's how I feel like we're going to heal the world.
Yeah. Shari, I could talk to you for hours. There's so much alignment, but I love your vulnerability in sharing your story and in your truth of embracing yourself first and offering yourself that healing. And what a gift that you are bringing to others. Please tell our listeners the name of your book, where they can find you, what's the best way to connect with you.
Thank you so much. I love this conversation too, and I feel the same way. So thanks for igniting my soul today.
Yes.
So the name
what
of
a
my
great way to start. What a great way to start a Monday morning.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. My book is called Love Yourself Happy, A Journey Back to You. And happy's there for a reason. So you read the book and figure that all out. And that is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And everyone can, I'm all over social media. The best way to find me on social media is just go to my website, ShariAlyse.com.
Perfect. And we will have those links in the show notes. Shari, thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing part of your morning with me, and for really just, you know what? I love having the podcast. It's great to be able to have a platform for our community and our audience and our listeners. But I have to say, at the root of it, it's really self-serving for me because I love connecting with people. I love these conversations. It uplifts my soul. So on a very personal note, just thank you. And next time I'm in LA, we're going to go meet for coffee and hang out. So I can't wait.
Sounds awesome. It's a date.
All right. You take care and be well.
Thank you so much.
To continue your journey forward, find Youre Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at jourerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.